I was in my London office when Mom's text arrived at 3:47 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time on December 29th. Outside my floor-to-ceiling windows, the Thames reflected the grey winter sky. Inside, my 3 monitors displayed real-time data from manufacturing facilities across 17 countries. The text was long. Mom had clearly labored over it. "Sweetheart, about New Year's Eve at Uncle Richard's estate. He's invited some very successful people, venture capitalists, hedge fund managers, a few billionaires from his yacht club. It's going to be quite formal and very high level. I think you'd feel uncomfortable. Maybe skip this one? We can have lunch just us in January. Love you. Heartsuit." I read it twice. Then I set my phone down and returned to the supply chain optimization report I'd been reviewing. Indonesia facility efficiency was up 23% quarter-over-quarter. Excellent. My assistant James knocked on my door. "Ms. Chin, the Automotive Week interview is in 10 minutes. They're set up in the conference room." "Thank you, James. Also, can you confirm my New Year's Day schedule? I'm flying back to Seattle tonight. You're scheduled to land at Seattle-Tacoma at 11:47 p.m. local time on the 31st. Car service arranged. You have New Year's Day off. Your first day off in 47 days, I might add." Perfect. I didn't respond to Mom's text. My family has always been impressed by the wrong things. Uncle Richard made his money in commercial real estate. Strip malls, office parks, apartment complexes. He was worth maybe $380 million and he never let anyone forget it. His house was a 12,000 square foot monstrosity in Bellevue with a 6-car garage showcasing vehicles he barely drove. His 3 children, my cousins Trevor, Vanessa and Blake, had grown up with trust funds and private school and summer homes in Aspen. Mom and Dad were comfortable but not wealthy. Dad was a civil engineer. Mom was a high school guidance counselor. They'd given my brother Jason and me a good middle-class upbringing in a nice Seattle suburb. But Uncle Richard's wealth created a gravitational pull in the family. Every holiday at his estate. Every major celebration at his yacht club. Every conversation somehow circling back to Richard's latest acquisition or investment. Jason fit right in. He went into tech sales, made good money, bought a Tesla, wore expensive suits, talked confidently about market trends he barely understood. Uncle Richard loved him. "That's a young man with ambition," he'd say, clapping Jason on the shoulder. I was different. I was quiet. I studied engineering at University of Washington instead of business at an Ivy League school. After graduation, I took a job at a small automotive parts manufacturer in Kent that no one had heard of. Annual salary, $54,000. Engineering. Uncle Richard had said when I told him, "That's technical work. Don't you want to do something more strategic?" "I like solving problems," I said. "Well, there's certainly problems to solve in manufacturing." He'd smiled in that pitying way people do when they think you're wasting your potential. "Just don't get stuck on the factory floor your whole career." For the next 12 years I was the family afterthought. At Thanksgiving dinners, Uncle Richard held court with stories about his latest developments. Jason talked about his tech sales quotas. Vanessa, who worked in her father's company doing something vague with property management, described her vacation in Bali. "What about you, Maya?" Mom would ask, obligatory and gentle. "Works good. We improved our defect rate by 11% last quarter." Silence. Then someone would change the subject. They didn't know I'd been promoted to operations manager at 27. Then director of manufacturing at 29. Then VP of operations at 31. They didn't know because I never told them and they never asked. When I turned 33, I got a call from a private equity firm. They wanted to buy the automotive parts company where I worked. The owner, a brilliant engineer named Tom Chin who'd become my mentor, was ready to retire. "They're offering $247 million, Tom told me over coffee. "The company's worth more, but I'm tired. I want to sell." "What happens to the employees?" I asked immediately. "That's up to the buyers. Probably layoffs. Consolidation. That's how these things go." I spent that night running numbers. Looking at my savings, $340,000 accumulated over 12 years of living modestly and investing aggressively. Looking at the company's actual value based on our contracts, our patents, our growth trajectory. The company wasn't worth $247 million. It was worth $380 million minimum. Possibly $500 million if we expanded into electric vehicle components, which I'd been pushing for but Tom had resisted. Let me buy it, I told Tom the next morning. He laughed. Maya, you don't have $247 million. I can get it. He stopped laughing. I spent 3 weeks putting together the most aggressive pitch of my life. I approached manufacturing consortiums in Asia. I found a specialty lender who understood automotive supply chains. I structured a leveraged buyout that required me to put up every penny I had as collateral and take on $223 million in debt. On paper it was insane. But I knew the company's real value. I knew the EV market was about to explode. I knew I could triple revenue in 5 years. Tom sold me the company for $247 million. I took control with $340,000 of my own money and a terrifying amount of debt. My family knew none of this. Maya's still at that auto parts place, Mom told relatives. She's doing well. Some kind of management role. I renamed the company Zenith Automotive Systems. Then I got to work. First I fired no one. Every private equity firm that had bid on the company planned to cut 30 to 40% of staff. I kept everyone and told them exactly what we were going to do. Become the premier supplier of electric vehicle components in North America. I repositioned our entire manufacturing strategy. We already made precision parts for traditional vehicles. I retrofitted 3 facilities to produce EV battery housings, thermal management systems and power electronics components. I hired away top engineers from Tesla and Rivian. I invested $47 million, borrowed money that kept me up at night, into R&D. The first year I paid myself $68,000 while servicing $223 million in debt. I lived in the same small apartment I'd had for years. I drove a 10-year-old Honda. My family assumed I was still just an employee. Year 2 we landed our first major EV contract. $89 million over 3 years with a new electric truck manufacturer. Revenue jumped 34%. I started paying down debt ahead of schedule. Year 3 Ford became a client. Then 3 Chinese EV companies expanding into North America. Revenue $347 million. Company valuation $680 million. My equity 73%. I paid myself $120,000. Still lived in the same apartment. Still drove the Honda. Year 4 we acquired 2 smaller competitors. Now we had facilities in 7 states plus Mexico. Revenue $624 million. Valuation $1.2 billion. My equity stake worth approximately $876 million. I bought a modest house in Madison Park. Nice but not ostentatious. 3 bedrooms, 2,400 square feet, water view. $1.8 million. I paid cash to avoid a mortgage but told my family I was renting. Year 5 we went public. The IPO priced at $34 per share, valuing Zenith Automotive at $2.8 billion. My stake, 51.7%, worth $1.447 billion after dilution. Forbes called it the quietest billionaire-making IPO of the decade. Bloomberg added me to their billionaire index at #1-247. I was 38 years old. I still drove the Honda. At family dinners the conversation remained unchanged. Trevor just closed a $50 million development deal, Uncle Richard announced at Easter. That's my boy. Jason hit 140% of quota this year, Dad said proudly. Top performer in his region. What about you, Maya? Mom asked. Busy at work. We're expanding production capacity. Still at that parts company? Uncle Richard asked. You know, Trevor's firm is looking for property managers. It's not too late to transition into real estate. Much better money than manufacturing. I'm happy where I am. Well, that's what matters, I suppose. He turned back to Trevor. Tell everyone about the luxury condo project downtown. They had no idea I was worth more than all of them combined. December 20th, Uncle Richard sent a family group text. Big New Year's Eve bash at the estate this year. Pulling out all the stops. Dress code black tie. This is going to be the party of the year. Mom called me that evening. Are you coming to Uncle Richard's party? I'm in London until the 31st, but I can probably make it. Oh. Boss. Well, actually, honey, it might be better if you skip this one. Why? Richards invited some very high-level people. Billionaires from his yacht club. Some venture capital people. A few tech CEOs. It's going to be very, you know. No, I don't know. Well, the conversation will all be about big deals and investments, and you might feel out of place. You know how Richard gets with his wealthy friends. Lots of talk about money and success. I just don't want you to feel uncomfortable. I was literally reviewing a $340 million acquisition while she said this. On my screen, due diligence documents for a German automotive supplier we were buying to expand into the European market. I see, I said. It's not that we don't want you there, Mom continued quickly. It's just, Jason will be there with his new girlfriend who works in venture capital. Trevor and Vanessa will have their successful friends. Blake just got promoted to partner at his law firm. Everyone will be talking about money and deals and, you know, your work is important, but it's just different from what these people do. Different. You work so hard, honey. You're so good at what you do. But this crowd, they're just on a different level financially. I don't want you to spend New Year's Eve feeling less than. Why don't we do lunch on January 2nd instead? Just you and me. I looked at my Bloomberg terminal. Zenith Automotive stock had closed at $67.34. Up 3.2% on news of our German acquisition. My net worth had increased by $43 million that day. Sure, Mom. Let's do lunch. Oh good. I'm so glad you understand, sweetie. After we hung up, I sat in my London office for a long time, looking at the city lights reflecting off the Thames. Then I called James. Change of plans. I want to arrive in Seattle by 6 p.m. on December 31st, not midnight. And I need a car service to take me to an address in Bellevue that evening. New Year's Eve plans, Miss Chin? Something like that. I knew something my family didn't know. Bloomberg's Billionaire Index updates in real time, but they publish a comprehensive year-end rankings update at exactly midnight GMT on January 1st, which was 4 p.m. Pacific Time on December 31st. The update includes detailed profiles of new billionaires, significant wealth changes, and a searchable database. It gets picked up by every major business news outlet within minutes. This year's update would be particularly interesting because my wealth had increased dramatically in Q4. The German acquisition, a major new contract with Volkswagen, and strong stock performance had pushed my net worth from $1.447 billion to $2.13 billion. Bloomberg had contacted me in November for comment. I'd given them a brief statement and a professional photo. They'd mentioned the update would go live on New Year's Eve. I'd said nothing to my family. I landed in Seattle at 5:47 p.m. on December 31st. My driver, a professional from the service I used for business travel, took me directly to Uncle Richard's estate in Bellevue. I was wearing what I always wore. Simple black dress, minimal jewelry, low heels. My only concession to black tie was that the dress was designer. Armani. $3,400. But it looked like something I could have bought at Nordstrom for $400. I arrived at 7:23 p.m. The circular driveway was packed with luxury vehicles. Bentleys, Rolls-Royce, multiple Ferraris, a Lamborghini. I asked my driver to park my car on the street. The house was lit up like a palace. Through the windows I could see at least 100 people in formal wear, champagne glasses glittering under crystal chandeliers. I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. Uncle Richard's assistant. Yes, he had an assistant. Opened the door. Name. Waya Chin. She checked her tablet, frowned. I don't see you on the guest list. I'm Richard's niece. Oh. Her expression shifted to confusion. Let me check with Mr. Chin. She disappeared. I stood in the doorway watching the party inside. I recognized a few faces from business news. The CEO of a major tech company. A prominent venture capitalist. Several people whose names appeared regularly in Forbes. Uncle Richard appeared, slightly flushed, champagne glass in hand. Waya, what are you doing here? Coming to your New Year's Eve party. I thought your mother said. We weren't expecting you. I was in the neighborhood. I stepped inside. Should I leave? No, of course not. It's just, this is a very high-level crowd. You might not have much in common with. I'll manage, I said, walking past him into the foyer. The party was exactly as pretentious as I'd expected. Groups of people in $1,000 outfits discussing their vacation homes and investment portfolios. Someone was talking about their new Gulfstream. Someone else was complaining about the difficulty of finding good staff for their yacht. I got a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and found a quiet corner. Jason spotted me first. Maya? What are you doing here? It's a family party. Yeah, but... He lowered his voice. Mom said you weren't coming. This crowd is pretty intense. Lots of big players. I'll try to keep up. He looked uncomfortable. Look, my girlfriend Amber is here. She's a VP at a VC firm. Very impressive woman. Maybe don't mention the manufacturing thing? It's just, this crowd doesn't really get blue-collar work. I'm not blue-collar. You know what I mean. Factory stuff. Just, maybe keep it vague. I smiled. Sure, Jason. He patted my shoulder and disappeared back into the crowd. I checked my phone. 7:56 p.m. Bloomberg's update would go live in 8 hours and 4 minutes. The evening progressed exactly as Mom had predicted. I was invisible. I stood in corners while important people discussed important things. No one asked who I was. When I did join conversations, they were politely dismissive once they realized I didn't work in tech or finance or real estate. What do you do? A man in a $6,000 tuxedo asked me around 9 p.m. I run an automotive supply company. Oh, like a parts supplier. Yes. That's interesting. He turned to someone else. Did you hear about the new EV startup that just raised $400 million? I sipped my champagne and said nothing. At 10:30 p.m., Uncle Richard gathered everyone for a toast. He was in his element, important people in his house, everyone's attention on him. I want to thank you all for being here tonight, he said, raising his glass. This room is full of the most successful people I know. Entrepreneurs, investors, industry leaders, people who've built empires and changed the world. Here's to another year of success. Everyone cheered. I noticed Mom in the corner looking pleased. Jason was next to his VC girlfriend, chest puffed out. Trevor, Vanessa, and Blake were soaking up reflected glory from their father's important friends. No one looked at me. At 11:45 p.m., I moved closer to the big screen TV in Uncle Richard's living room. He had it tuned to CNN's New Year's Eve coverage, though most people were ignoring it. I checked my phone again. 11:47 p.m. Pacific. Bloomberg's update had gone live 13 minutes ago. I opened the Bloomberg website on my phone. There it was, Bloomberg Billionaires Index, 2025 year-end update. I clicked through to the searchable database and typed my name. Number 847, Maya Chin, net worth, $2.13 billion. Source, automotive manufacturing residence, Seattle, Washington, age 38. The profile included details about Zenith Automotive's public offering, our revenue growth, my 51.7% ownership stake, and our recent German acquisition. There was the professional photo I'd provided, me in my office, Seattle skyline behind me. I took a screenshot and waited. 11:52 p.m. People were starting to gather around the TV for the countdown. Uncle Richard was holding court, arm around a hedge fund manager, explaining his latest real estate play. 11:56 p.m. Trevor walked past me to get another champagne bottle. He didn't acknowledge me. 11:58 p.m. I noticed Amber, Jason's girlfriend, looking at her phone with a strange expression. She was a VP at a venture capital firm. She probably had Bloomberg alerts. 11:59 p.m. 10, 9, 8. The crowd started counting down. Amber was staring at her phone, then at me, then back at her phone. She grabbed Jason's arm and whispered something urgent in his ear. 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year. Confetti cannons. Champagne corks popping. Kissing couples. Cheering. And Amber's voice cutting through the noise. Jason. Jason. Is your sister's name Maya Chin? The room didn't quiet immediately, but several people near them stopped talking. Jason looked confused. Yeah, why? Amber's hand was shaking as she held up her phone. This Maya Chin? She showed him her screen, Bloomberg's billionaire profile with my photo. Jason's face went white. That's not. He looked at me across the room. That's not the same person. It's the same photo, Amber said loudly. Maya Chin. Age 38. Seattle. Automotive manufacturing. Net worth $2.13 billion. More people were stopping their conversations now. Uncle Richard pushed through the crowd. What are you talking about? Amber turned her phone to him. Bloomberg just updated their billionaire index. Mayachin, ranked number 847. Worth $2.13 billion. Uncle Richard stared at the screen, then at me. This is a different Mayachin. There are lots of Chens. It's the same person, Dad, Trevor said quietly. He was holding up his own phone. Look at the photo. That's her. The room was silent now except for the TV still playing New Year's coverage. Uncle Richard walked slowly across the room to me. Hi, Uncle Richard. Great party. This says you're worth over $2 billion. $2.13 billion as of market close yesterday. Probably a bit more now with after-hours trading, but Bloomberg won't update that until Monday. Mom's voice, shrill and confused. I don't understand. I turned to look at her. She was standing next to Dad, both of them staring at me like I was a stranger. You said you worked at an auto parts company, Mom said. I do. I own it. Own it. I bought it 12 years ago. We went public 5 years ago. Zenith Automotive. We're the largest independent supplier of EV components in North America. I took a sip of champagne. We did $1.3 billion in revenue last year. Market cap is currently $4.1 billion. I own 51.7% of the stock. Complete silence. Then Vanessa's voice, angry. You've been lying to us? I haven't lied about anything. You never asked. You let us think you were just an employee. You assumed I was just an employee. There's a difference. I looked around the room. I told you I worked in manufacturing. That I was expanding production capacity. That we were growing. Everything I said was true. You just never cared enough to ask for details. Jason stepped forward. Why wouldn't you tell us? Would it have mattered? I asked simply. When's the last time anyone in this family asked me about my work? Really asked? Not just, how's the job, as a formality before changing the subject. No one answered. I'll tell you when, I continued. Never. Because to you manufacturing isn't impressive. Engineering isn't strategic. Building things with your hands isn't worth discussing when we can talk about real estate deals and tech sales and venture capital. Uncle Richard's face was red. That's not fair. Isn't it? I looked directly at him. You told me not to get stuck on the factory floor. You suggested I transition into property management because there's better money there. Do you even know what Zenith Automotive does? What we manufacture? He said nothing. We make the thermal management systems for 40% of electric vehicles produced in North America. We hold 37 patents. We employ 4,600 people across 11 facilities. I've acquired 6 smaller companies in the last 3 years. We're expanding into Europe and Asia. I paused. And yes, Uncle Richard, there is better money in it than property management. Considerably better. The hedge fund manager Uncle Richard had been talking to earlier stepped forward, hand extended. Miss Chin, I'm David Rothstein. Rothstein Capital. I've been trying to get a meeting with you for 6 months. I shook his hand. Mr. Rothstein. Your team contacted us about the German acquisition. We went with Deutsche Bank instead, but I appreciated the pitch. Yes. He looked stunned. I had no idea you were Richard's niece. Why would you? I smiled. It's not relevant to business. A woman in a stunning red dress approached. I recognized her, CEO of a major tech company, worth about $800 million herself. Zenith Automotive. You're the one who locked in the Volkswagen contract. We signed a 7-year $940 million deal last quarter, yes. My company uses your power electronics components in our delivery vehicles. Outstanding quality. She raised her glass to me. You've built something remarkable. Thank you. Uncle Richard looked like he might faint. You're worth more than me. Quite a bit more, actually. Mom sat down heavily on a couch. I told you not to come because you'd feel out of place with billionaires. I know, Mom. You are a billionaire. Yes. Since when? Since the IPO 5 years ago. I've been hovering between $1.40 and $2.2 billion depending on stock performance. Dad finally spoke, his voice quiet. Why didn't you tell us? I looked at him for a long moment. Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was exaggerating, making myself sound more important than I was? I set down my champagne glass. You've spent my entire adult life being more impressed by Jason's sales quotas than by anything I've accomplished. You've spent every family gathering celebrating Uncle Richard's strip malls and Trevor's mediocre property development projects. You've never once asked me to explain what I actually do. Not once. That's not true, Mom started. Mom, you told me not to come tonight because I'd feel uncomfortable around successful people. I let that sink in. I spent the evening being ignored by people who would have killed for an introduction if they'd known who I was. I watched Uncle Richard brag about his real estate portfolio to a room full of people, half of whom are worth more than him. I listened to Trevor talk about his $50 million development deal like it was a major accomplishment. I paused. I acquired a company for $340 million last month. It barely made the news because it's just normal business for us now. Trevor's face was scarlet. You're just trying to embarrass us. No, Trevor. I'm trying to make you understand that you've been embarrassing yourselves, all of you, by assuming that the only kind of success worth noticing is the loud kind, the flashy kind, the kind that comes with expensive cars and big houses and constant bragging. Jason's girlfriend Amber was still staring at her phone. Forbes has an article from last year. The Secret Billionaire, How Maya Chin Built an EV Empire in Silence. There's a whole profile. Can I see that? Uncle Richard asked. She handed him her phone. He read in silence. His face went through several expressions: shock, disbelief, something that might have been shame. This says you paid off $223 million in debt in 7 years, he said quietly. 5 years, actually. We were ahead of schedule. It says you took your entire life savings, $340,000, and used it as collateral for a leveraged buyout. That's correct. That's insane. He looked up at me. That's the gutsiest business move I've ever heard of. I knew the company's value. I knew the market opportunity. I knew I could execute. And you did all this without telling anyone? Without asking for help? Who would I have asked? I said simply, You thought I was wasting my time in manufacturing. You told me to get into real estate. If I'd come to you 12 years ago and said I wanted to buy my company for $247 million, you would have laughed. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. You're right. I would have. Mom was crying now. I'm so sorry, Maya. I'm so sorry we didn't see. It's fine, Mom. It's not fine. She stood up, walked to me, grabbed my hands. My daughter is a billionaire. My daughter built a company from nothing. My daughter is brilliant and successful, and I told her not to come to a party because I thought she wasn't good enough. Her voice broke on the last words. I squeezed her hands gently. You thought you were protecting me. I understand. I should have asked. I should have cared. I should have. She trailed off, still crying. Dad approached slowly. The Bloomberg article mentions you've donated $127 million to charity over the last 3 years. $134 million total. Engineering scholarships mostly. Some manufacturing workforce development programs. You've given away more money than I'll make in my entire life. Probably yes. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. I'm your father. I should have known this. I should have. Maya, I'm so sorry. Around the room, conversations were starting up again. But they were different now. People were pulling up articles about Zenith Automotive on their phones. The CEO who'd complimented my components was telling someone about our manufacturing quality. David Rothstein was discussing our stock performance with another investor. Uncle Richard stood in the center of his own living room looking lost. I thought I was the successful one in the family. You are successful, Uncle Richard. You've built a good business. You should be proud of that. But you're worth more? Yes. But that doesn't diminish what you've accomplished. You just spent the last 12 years treating me like an afterthought because my success was quieter than yours. He had no response to that. By 12:47 a.m., the Bloomberg article had been picked up by CNN Business, CNBC, Forbes, and the Wall Street Journal. Seattle's secret billionaire revealed was trending on financial Twitter. My phone started ringing. My PR team. My CFO. My board chairman wanting to know if I needed any support with the sudden media attention. I stepped out onto Uncle Richard's back patio to take the calls. The yard was beautifully landscaped, lit with tasteful path lighting. Through the windows I could see the party continuing, but the dynamics had completely shifted. People kept glancing at me, whispering. Several guests had asked Jason and Trevor for introductions. When I came back inside at 1:15 a.m., a small group had formed around Mom and Dad. People were asking them about me, about my childhood, about how they'd raised such a successful daughter. Mom was glowing, telling stories I'd forgotten. Maya was always so focused. Even as a little girl, she'd spend hours taking apart machines to see how they worked. Jason approached me carefully. Amber wants to apologize for not recognizing you earlier. There's nothing to apologize for. She didn't know. She feels terrible. Her firm tried to get a meeting with you last year for that Series C funding round for the battery startup. I remember. We passed. Their technology wasn't differentiated enough. They went bankrupt 6 months later. I know. He stared at me. You're really good at this, aren't you? At what? Business. Building things. You're not just lucky. You're genuinely brilliant at what you do. I work hard. I understand the industry. I make good decisions most of the time. Most billionaires inherited their money or got lucky with one big hit. You built this yourself. From nothing. He shook his head. I've been a condescending asshole. Yes, you have. He laughed, surprised. You're not going to make this easy. Why should I? But I smiled slightly. Jason, I don't need you to grovel. I need you to understand that success comes in many forms. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most accomplished. Understood. He paused. Can I buy you lunch next week? Actually ask you about your work? As your brother, not as someone trying to network. I'd like that. I left Uncle Richard's party at 2:30 a.m. As I walked out, at least 15 people asked for my contact information. I politely declined most of them and referred them to my assistant. The next morning, New Year's Day, my phone exploded with messages. Uncle Richard, hiya, I owe you a genuine apology. Can we have coffee? I'd like to understand what you've built. Really understand it. Trevor, I've been reading about Zenith all morning. What you've accomplished is extraordinary. I'm sorry I never asked about your work. Vanessa, I saw the Forbes article from last year. The way you turned around that failing company is incredible. Can we talk? I'd love to hear the real story. Blake, I had no idea. None of us did. That's on us, not you. I'm sorry we were so blind. Mom called at 10:47 a.m. Honey, I couldn't sleep. I spent all night reading articles about you. About your company. About what you've built. He was crying again. I'm so proud of you. And I'm so ashamed it took a Bloomberg article for me to see what was right in front of me. Mom. No, let me say this. You're brilliant. You're accomplished. You've built something remarkable. And I spent years treating your work like it was a hobby compared to Jason's sales job. I was a terrible mother. You weren't terrible. You were just focused on the wrong things. That's the same as being terrible. She took a shaky breath. Can you forgive me? There's nothing to forgive. You didn't know because I didn't tell you. I should have asked. That's the point. I should have cared enough to ask. We talked for an hour. Really talked. I explained the leveraged buyout, the years of brutal work, the strategic decisions that had paid off, the risks that had kept me up at night. She listened to every word. You're going to be insufferable now, aren't you? I asked when we were wrapping up. Telling everyone your daughter is a billionaire? Absolutely. She laughed through her tears. I've earned the right to brag after missing it for 12 years. January 2nd, I had lunch with Mom as planned. Just us. We talked about Zenith's expansion plans, my goals for the company, the challenges of being a public company CEO. She asked real questions. She took notes. She wanted to understand. January 15th, Uncle Richard came to visit Zenith's headquarters. I gave him a full tour. The manufacturing floor, the R&D labs, the quality control systems. He asked intelligent questions. He was genuinely impressed, not just because of the money but because of what we'd built. I've been in business 40 years, he said as we stood in front of a wall displaying our patents. I thought I understood success. But this, what you've built, it's on another level. Different level, I corrected. Not better or worse. Just different. No, Maya. It's better. You've built something that matters. That employs thousands of people. That's driving innovation in an industry that's changing the world. He looked at me. I wasted 12 years dismissing you because I was too arrogant to see past my own definition of success. February brought family dinners with a new dynamic. People asked me about work. Really asked. They wanted to hear about the Volkswagen contract, the German acquisition, our expansion plans in Asia. Jason brought Amber to several dinners. He and I became friends. Her VC firm eventually partnered with Zenith on a battery technology startup we were investing in. Good business for both of us. Trevor started asking me for business advice. Not to network. Not to use me. Just because he genuinely wanted to learn from someone who'd built something from scratch. Dad framed the Bloomberg article and hung it in his office. Proud of my daughter, he told everyone who visited. Mom started a scholarship fund for women in engineering in my name. She seeded it with $50,000 of her own money. I matched it with $5 million. The media attention eventually died down, which I appreciated. I went back to running my company, which was what I actually cared about. But the family dynamic never went back to what it was. In June, Uncle Richard invited me to his yacht club for lunch. Some of the people from New Year's Eve will be there, he warned. Is that okay? It's fine. We arrived to find a small gathering on the deck overlooking the water. The hedge fund manager, the tech CEO, a few venture capitalists I'd met that night. Paya. David Rothstein stood up when I arrived. I've been trying to get another meeting with you for months. Your assistant scheduled something for July, I said, shaking his hand. 3 months out. Your team is very protective of your time. I run a $4.1 billion company. My time is limited. He laughed. Fair enough. The tech CEO pulled me aside. I wanted to thank you. The components we get from Zenith have been flawless. Our vehicle production has increased by 19% since we switched suppliers. That's good to hear. Quality is everything. I'm telling everyone who'll listen. You've built something special. Uncle Richard found me at the end of lunch. This is surreal. You're the most important person here. I'm just me, Uncle Richard. I was always just me. You just didn't notice. He smiled sadly. I noticed. I just didn't understand. There's a difference. As I drove home that evening, still in my Honda, which I kept for sentimental reasons despite now owning a Tesla and a Porsche I rarely drove, I thought about Mom's text from December 29th. New Year's Eve is high net worth only. You'd feel out of place. She'd been right in a way. I had felt out of place. Not because I wasn't wealthy enough, but because I'd spent 12 years being invisible to people who should have seen me. Being dismissed by people who should have celebrated me. Being treated as less than by the very people who should have known better. The Bloomberg article hadn't changed who I was. I was still the same person who'd spent years building something meaningful in silence. But it had changed how they saw me. And that, I realized as I pulled into my driveway overlooking the water, was the real triumph. Not the billions. Not the recognition. But forcing the people who'd dismissed me to finally see what had been there all along.